I'm Dylan Radigan. I've interviewed nearly every CEO and most world leaders during the past 25 years. And now I'm bootstrapping. I'm turning my attention to the new CEOs and the irrepressible entrepreneurs leading the next generation of innovation in the world. Welcome back to Tasty Live. I am Dylan Radigan. Time for some more bootstrapping. My guest today, Rod Levy, the company Code Platoon. Rod is the founder and the executive director. He's the boss. And the company, like the name implies, is a code instruction academy, with the implication of the word platoon, that targets returning and transitioning veterans to help them acquire this skill and participate in one of the higher paying and more creative points in our economy. Rod, welcome. There's a lot of code farms out there, codes for kids, codes for girls, codes for this. What is specific about, creating a coding academy for transitioning service personnel?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. We're different than these sort of coding farms that you're talking about in a couple different ways. First of all, we're a nonprofit, which there's a lot of nonprofits out there, but we focus on providing our community, which is veterans, active duty transitioning, and military spouses, and getting them into the career. So that means that our 15-week immersive program is rigorous. It's roughly 70 hours a week of material. By the time they finished our program, they'll have done roughly 1,000 hours of curriculum. And so our goal isn't just to teach them a little bit about coding, introduce them to tech. No, we're getting them ready to be professional software developers.
So you're not creating a job, you're creating a career, which is a massive distinction.
Yes, that's right. And we're not just giving them an introduction. A lot of the coding programs are focused on introducing people to the field. We're well beyond that.
Meaning that Code Platoon stays with the students through the point of proficiency, not just through the point of familiarity.
Exactly. Proficiency to the point where you can get hired, and our students graduate and their median salary after they graduate is $85,000 a year. That's pretty serious transition for many of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And are you working directly with the transitioning service personnel offices on the bases, or how are you recruiting your students?
Yeah, we use pretty traditional sort of social media, marketing materials. Getting on base is pretty difficult and really well beyond our budget in many different ways. So we try to have just connection, like we really just try to get out to the military community through word of mouth, and try to punch above our weight given our size.
And how big are you?
So we have, our staff is around 12, 15 folks, depending on how you count it. And we run 3 sessions a year full time. We run 2 evening and weekend sessions, and we graduate about 130 to 150 veterans and spouses every year.
And then how long is a semester or a term?
Each session runs 15 weeks, start to finish. When you're at the end of the 15 weeks, you're done with our program. You're ready to get hired.
Okay. And then what about the employer side? What's your relationship at week 16? Yeah,
so we try to work with companies really in one of 2 different ways. The gentlest, easiest ways. Many companies need tech, even in today's sort of tech downturn. A lot of companies that aren't purely FANG stocks are still looking for tech talent. And we are a great place to find well-trained, mature, but junior talent. And they love the fact that we're military. These folks show up on time, stay late, work hard, and work in teams, like all the characteristics, we skills that companies are sourcing for. They come to Code Platoon, they find them right away. So many companies want to recruit, we have that pipeline directly to them. Other companies want to get first crack at our talent. They want to hire effectively when somebody's in our program. These are apprenticeship partners, and we try to cultivate as many of these relationships as we can.
And if you had more financial resources, what would limit you? And do you feel like you're ready? Like, could you manage 10x the budget for something like this?
I don't think we could do it well. No, I think we could grow there.
Part of the reason this works is because of its size relative to the students, I would imagine.
Well, we've been scaling slowly. Our class sizes were 4 to 6 people 3 years ago, and now they're 40. So we have seen a 10x growth in that sense, and the placement numbers remain the same, but we just do it thoughtfully. And yes, we're building our model to be more scalable. But our audience size is also somewhat limited. There are only so many veterans and military spouses out there that want to get into tech, and we're pretty vigorous and rigorous about who we let into our program. It's a difficult program. We only want folks that are going to be able to go through it and be successful to do it. So on the screening process on the way in, we really try to make sure through a series of interviews and tech challenges that the folks that coming into our program are prepared to go through it.
Mm-hmm.
And we definitely opened up the floodgates if we just lowered our admissions, if you will.
Yeah, I understand. And you're Chicago based?
We have an in-person experience and a remote experience. The two actually are taught at the same time. So a quarter of our students here in Chicago, they go to our classroom down at the WeWork, beautiful space. And the other 3/4 are all over the world. We got students from Korea, Finland, but most of them are still in the US.
Understood. But the experience, it's really the student's option. If it's easy, if they're in the neighborhood and they want to go to a space, they can. If they're in Finland, they can do that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And what have you found? How have you considered how the latest technology, specifically AI, is changing the way you teach people to code because of the prompt response mechanism, which sort of empowers people that are good at prompting?
Yeah.
As a new skill, like prompters will make $300,000 a year because they're great at prompting.
That's right.
I'm just interested whether that's something you've considered at this point.
Yeah, we're having internal conversations. Every educator is, right? And the questions span from like abuse internally, like can students cheat? But at the end of the day, we
Yes.
want our students to be empowered to use these tools. So, and so from the world of software design in particular, the ability to help scale the productivity of developers is really amazing. So we're, yeah, so we're seeing that happen with our students organically. We haven't integrated into curriculum yet. How we actually write curriculum, how we actually prepare our classroom will also be impacted. So right now we're keeping, I'd say, a watchful eye. Our admissions are impacted also. Now it's easier to cheat on our tests. But we haven't done anything directly integrating the sort of GPT and AI yet, but it's coming for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure basically nobody is integrated in any sort of coherent curriculum way. But I think but it has been integrated enough into things like Bing and all the rest of this, and then also GitHub, which would be interesting.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm very interested. Just I'm optimistic. My optimistic view is that if people understand that prompting is as a key skill along with other skills, that you can really have an explosion in productivity.
Well, so it's interesting you talk about prompting. One of the core skills that we teach, which is timeless and universal, is the ability to break down a problem into its simplest components so that you can actually understand what are the right questions you need to ask so that you can solve them. So we've been preparing our students to do that as it is. They just didn't realize it. But we see it come out in their work. We've seen students where they will produce a piece of software and then they've been using ChatGPT to ask it to review code in a very specific way. So you need to understand, how do I ask the question so that I get the right code on the way back? And the results we've seen are actually pretty impressive.
And I completely agree with that, up to the point where even like if it's just any decision-making body of any kind, the biggest flaw typically is the inability to ask the right questions. And the biggest advantage is those that are good at taking a real inventory before they even ask a question. They understand they need to take an inventory of information, existing field of information before they can even start to ask questions. And that's fascinating to me because I feel like the educational institutions that are the most effective at helping people understand how to organically generate intuitive prompting that is valuable for them will have a huge. I just feel like there's going to be a big gap between. There's going to be. It's like the curve's going to go like this, where some of the educational institutions are going to be going off because they're going to be like, we teach you how to ask the right questions and then how to observe the right reality, and that's going to be a really valuable school. And then down the line, back to people that are doing, sort of industrial memorization from 30 years ago.
Sure. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it comes back to first principles, right?
Yeah.
Understanding what is the core question that you're trying to solve for, and not getting lost in the weeds, and sort of and what your intuition might tell you to do, or what you might be inherently drawn to. Being able to decompose a problem into its fundamental pieces is something that we really have been trying to teach from day one. It's really part of the core aspects of being a good software engineer.
Yeah. And or a good executive at anything.
Of course, of
That
course.
kind of basic executive function is limited by your ability to observe and ask questions.
Well, so it's funny you mentioned that. I personally went through a boot camp before I started Code Platoon. I went through the very first boot camp, which was called Dev Boot Camp. And really, this aspect of breaking down problems and decomposing it is fundamental to be able to write good methods inside of your code. But even though I didn't end up being a coder, I took away that aspect of decomposition of a problem and understanding what stands alone and what is intertwined with other questions, what's brittle and what is not brittle. That learning that I took from software engineering has carried forward into my business side in a very, very effective way.
I'm sure. I'm imagining there are specific disciplines or profiles within the military that you would recruit from.
So it's interesting. I went into this thinking that I'm going to try to get folks who are either in cyber, or who already have some sort of tech exposure. Back in 2014, 2015, there weren't a lot of actually technological disciplines to draw from. Now there are more, but it turns out the students that do really well in our program come from all kinds of backgrounds, and education is really not a differentiating characteristic. But I will say we actually do well with students that graduated from what's called the Defense Language Institute. It is a program inside of the military that trains folks to be linguists, so cryptologic linguists, learn Korean or Chinese or Arabic. That program is very difficult and rigorous. It looks a lot like our program. Plus, they're learning a new language. At the end of the day, that's what we're teaching is languages. And we also do well with musicians. So, yeah.
And that's interesting because the people think of the coding as sort of the technical end of the spectrum, and music as at the musicians at the creative end of the spectrum, and it sort of speaks to the idea that those two different parts of the brain are opposite and the same in a sense. That we could use this as an anecdote anyway to try to advance that thesis. Do you think the musicians have a particular aptitude for coding?
I mean, we see it anecdotally. We don't actually track it as a data point. We don't ask folks, "Are you a musician?" Maybe we should. But the folks that come in that were in like the military band, we have certainly applicants that did that. We've seen a lot of them do well in our program.
Yeah, that's remarkable. And are there things that you could do? So one could argue, okay, your key skill set is we teach coding and we do it in a good way and we give people jobs and they make more money. But the other thing that may be that you know how to attract transitioning service personnel who are looking to educate themselves and advance their careers, and creating educational modules for them that will allow them to do that. So is there a world where you do something in addition to coding?
Oh, so different disciplines or more bite-sized so they don't have to go through
different disciplines. So if you've got code platoon, you could have health platoon or I don't know, like some other platoons.
Yes, so I do believe you stick to what you know and you stick to your knitting as much as possible. Do it well. We are broadening our disciplines within tech, so we're actually launching a DevOps program. DevOps is sort of a subset within technology that's a more specific discipline than software development and coding. But what do we get? Like what you might see other boot camps doing is sometimes they get into tech-facing disciplines like product management, data analysts. We certainly would consider doing that at some point. Healthcare, that's probably too far afield for us.
And then how is the business funded?
Really primarily comes through either grants and donations, grants primarily, and then we also get a lot of support through the VA because we are a VA approved program to receive the GI Bill and a program that resembles a GI Bill called Vet Tech. So we get a lot of funding through the VA as well.
Rod Levy is his name. Code Platoon is the company. You're watching Tasty Live. I am Dylan Radigan. We're back after this.